Welcome to Moving Panels One Shot, and let's have a short, nerdy conversation. Joining me today is multi-time guest host, Mr. Blake Fowler.
And short, nerdy conversations are my favorite kind of conversations to have.
Isn't it, though?
It is. It's fantastic.
So today, Blake and I are going to discuss, when it comes to DC animated movies and television shows, why are the voice actors so good?
Spine-tingling good.
So from all the way back to the 90s, I'll even argue in some cases before that, but from definitely the 90s, with Batman the Animated Series, Superman the Animated Series, into Justice League, once the animated movies kind of started and all, we have one person to thank for those iconic voices, and that's Adria Romano, or however you pronounce her first name, Andrea Romano.
However you pronounce it. Can we just talk about, she's probably responsible for the majority of the enjoyment of my childhood.
Yeah, so where Paul Dini did a lot of the writing for that, Bruce Timm was the producer behind all of that, Andrea Romano was the one casting. She was the one finding these iconic voices. And I mean, it's no question we're definitely going to talk about, Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill and Tim Daly and George Newbern, all of these voices in which we immediately, as comic book superhero fans, we think of their voices when we see our characters nowadays.
In some cases, I would say you think about those voice actors before you even think of the live action actors who play some of these characters.
In some cases, at least when you hear the character speak in your head, like when you're reading the comic and you kind of hear the character speaking in your own head.
Absolutely. Not to get ahead of myself, but Kevin Conroy is one of those. If I'm reading a Batman comic, bam, it's Kevin Conroy's Batman and Bruce Wayne in my head.
Oh, yeah. So I think that gets us right into that. So let's talk about Batman. So obviously, Kevin Conroy is the voice.
He's not only is he the voice of Batman, and again, it's one of those, he's more the voice than any live action person is for me. I would argue that he's the most recognizable DC voice actor, period.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
I think you'd be hard pressed to find somebody that is a DC voice actor. When you play that voice, somebody's eyes closed, sight unseen, they'll know immediately who it is. I don't know if you can do that with any other one.
No, well, yeah, I'm going to disagree with you on that.
Maybe Mark Hamill. Maybe Mark Hamill. Okay.
Yeah, but I get what you're saying. So that's, again, we're focusing on DC characters because I don't know if you can do that with any Marvel character. I mean, I can name actors who are the voices of Marvel characters, but none of them just stick out as the quintessential voice of that character. I mean, Fred Tatasciore, however you pronounce his name, he's the Hulk.
That was excellent.
And, he's always been the Hulk.
But who's going to know that? Just a random person walking in the street, I can walk up to them and play them a voice recording of Mark Hamill as Joker. They're going to be able to identify it.
Oh, yeah. That's exactly my point. I mean, even when you think of the Joker, you're going to think of Mark Hamill. And you're going to think of that laugh.
Yep.
He's just dead on. I mean, again, going back to Marvel, Adrian Pastar, Iron Man. He did Iron Man a couple of times, and it worked. But when I hear Iron Man, like you talked about earlier, I hear Robert Downey Jr.'s voice.
Right, I hear Robert now.
Yeah, but when I hear Batman, I hear Kevin Conroy's voice. As great as Michael Keaton has been, Christian Bale has been, your arguments could be about Ben Affleck, Adam West. As great as they've been performing the character, when I think and when I imagine Batman's voice, I hear Kevin Conroy.
You're certainly not going to find any argument from me on that case. I would like to only add to it that because the voice acting is so good, I can, like I said, reading the comic, I can see him acting out just through the voice. Like, I can still see, we talk about these live action guys that are on screen, see them moving around, see them interacting. But like Kevin Conroy does that with just his voice, the emotion in the voice. He's not the one acting things out. He does a lot for me personally.
Okay, let's talk about other Batmans.
Okay.
What about Diedrich Bader?
What about Dietrich Bader, Laramie? What about him?
So, I mean,
From a,
Diedrich
from a
Bader.
comedic standpoint, he does a
Okay,
good
yeah.
job. Yeah.
So, Diedrich Bader, for those unfamiliar, Diedrich Bader was the voice of Batman for Batman the Brave and the Bold, which was a more lighthearted, comedic version of Batman. And so, did it work? Is it good? I think it was.
His line delivery for the comedic performance, and if I'm not mistaken, he's also voicing Batman in the new Harley Quinn series. So he does a good job of the comedic delivery part. But I like my Batman serious. I like my Batman dark and brooding. And so yeah, he does okay with the humor side. But I'm still, you're not going to get me off of Kevin Conroy.
No, I'm not asking you to. Continuing with the comedic side, Diedrich Bader or Will Arnett from Lego Batman?
Will Arnett.
Okay.
Not even a question.
All right, so let's go back to the dark brooding Batmans.
Okay.
So
okay.
Kevin Conroy is no longer the voice of Batman in the animated movies. He has been placed by Jason O'Mara.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on Jason O'Mara?
In a vacuum, where in a world where Kevin Conroy doesn't exist, Jason O'Mara does a fantastic job. I have no problem with Jason O'Mara, outside the fact that he's not Kevin Conroy. That's my only issue, man.
All right, I want to throw one more at you, and then we can move on from Batman.
Okay.
Because I'm a fan of Dark Knight Returns.
Oh.
And in the Dark Knight Returns, I love the older Batman voice by RoboCop himself, Peter Weller.
For the aged Batman, Weller does a good job. I'm not going to discount his performance in The Dark Knight Returns. But don't you think Conroy would have done just as good a job, if not better?
No, I don't think... I think Conroy's Batman would not have sound aged enough. Even though Conroy himself has aged.
Okay.
I think they needed a... I don't know if Conroy could have pulled off the line of... this is an operating table.
Not a mud hole. Yeah. It's not a mud hole.
As great as Conroy is, I don't think he could have pulled that off as well as Peter Weller did.
You might have me there. That might be the only concession I'll make on the Kevin Conroy argument.
All right, so let's move on to stay in the world of Batman. Let's move on to the Joker. No disagreement whatsoever. Mark Hamill is hands down the voice of the Joker.
For generations.
Yeah, Luke Skywalker himself will always be identified as Luke Skywalker and the voice of the Joker.
Yeah, I don't know that any other villain is even going to come close to being as recognizable as Mark Hamill as the Joker.
Yeah, I actually, while I was prepping for this show, I couldn't honestly think of a lot of villains whose voices are so iconic with the character. I mean, I could think of villains and their voices, but I was like, none of them are the ones that just resonate in my head when I think of those characters.
So I think the only other villain that might be as recognizable as the Joker is also in tandem with the Joker, and that would be Harley Quinn, who's voiced by Arlene Sorkin. I think you hear the Harley Quinn voice, and you can automatically recognize who that is as Sorkin to go along with Hamill. I don't know if that works because she's side by side with Hamill or because she's so unique on her own, but either way, they're both pretty recognizable.
Oh, no, I agree. That's a very recognizable voice. In fact, when they threw... I don't know if it was her or if it had already switched to Tara Strong, but when they threw in her saying something, it was one line in the television show Arrow. You just hear her from the other side of a door. Mm-hmm. And I was, well, that's Harley Quinn. Even though they didn't...
you don't have to see the face.
Yeah, didn't have to show the face, didn't have to know anything. You just heard the voice. You knew it was Harley Quinn.
Right, yeah. So, yeah, she's recognizable, but to get kind of back on track of our original point for the villains and Mark Hamill... there's just, and it's not even that he's like a funny, it's not like a jokey Joker. Like it's a chilling voice and laugh of the Joker that he's got.
Oh no, the laugh is terrifying. Mm-hmm. And that's one of the things about it. Speaking of terrifying, there's a couple of other Jokers, and I'm not going to say that their voices necessarily immediately come to mind, but if you're talking about a terrifying voice for the Joker, what about Michael Emerson in Dark Knight Returns?
Yeah, that's a Joker that has seen some things and done some things, and brings, I don't know how you describe, like his voice is just heavy. Like it's just this weary, weighing you down kind of voice. That's a really good, not Hamill, but still a really good argument.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you've got Jason Spizik, I think is how you pronounce his last name.
I think.
Who was the Joker for Hush.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Spizik. So I think you're correct on that last name pronunciation. I'm not certainly sure because Hush, I kind of glanced to kind of slept through Hush, to be honest with you. It wasn't my favorite, but
okay.
Yeah, it was okay. The voice acting was okay.
Now let's start getting. I was about to get into comedic stuff, but speaking of comedic stuff, but also really terrifying Jokers. So John DiMaggio, who most people would recognize as the voice of Bender from Futurama, or if you're not that old, Jake from Adventure Time, he was actually the voice of the Joker for Under the Red Hood. So he's the one that kills Robin.
And if you're one of those people who's old enough to have voted to have killed Robin initially, maybe you're excited about that. I don't know. Again, just not my Joker. # not my Joker.
Okay. I'm with you.
Yeah.
Mark Hamill all the way.
Yeah.
Even though we're saying Mark Hamill is the best voice, these other actors have just been great in the movie or the show in which they were casted for.
Yeah. So again, in a vacuum, dude, like all of these people who are casted have done phenomenal jobs for the most part. Not say all, but for the most part, by themselves, alone, desert island, like they're phenomenal.
So let's go comedic. So we got Zach Galifianakis from the Lego Batman movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't think you can argue that Zach Galifianakis cannot play. I mean, he's almost like a real life living Joker, just not as evil.
And then, of course, most recently for the Harley Quinn animated series, you got great voice actor Alan Tudyk.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so you want to talk about good comedic delivery of lines? Alan Tudyk does a fantastic job. That's as far as the comedic side, he's it for me for the Joker, and also voices a couple other people in the show too. So it does a good job there.
Yes. Yeah, he's Clayface. I'm sure he's some of the other random characters. Mm-hmm. Of course, he's done voices all over the place.
So good.
All right, so Batman, Joker, Harley Quinn, although we didn't mention Kaylee Cuoco, who also from the Harley Quinn series there.
Yeah, got no problem with Kaylee.
But we got to move on to my man. Let's talk about Superman. Mm-hmm. Whose voice comes to mind when you think of Superman? Because I'm torn on this. I have two. I mentioned them earlier.
See, I'll just go straight for Mr. Newbern. I'll go for George. That's the first guy I think of.
Yeah, I think Newbern edges it out for me. For those of you not aware, Tim Daly was the original voice for the Superman animated series. He did return to voice Superman when they started doing the Superman Batman movies, and they did Public Enemy and Apocalypse. That's Tim Daly's voice. So him paired with Kevin Conroy. George Newbern became the voice of Superman for the Justice League animated series, and then went on to voice him in the Injustice video games, voiced him in Superman vs. the Elite, Superman vs. the Fatal Five. And so George Newbern, I think it's a very similar voice.
It's hard to distinguish, yeah.
And so Tim Daly, George Newbern, I do think George Newbern edges it out for me as well. But again, great. It's just that they have such that powerful but yet clear and gentle voice that Superman needs.
And as recognizable as Kevin Conroy is. Like, it's tough to stand up against Kevin Conroy voice acting wise. But the voice of Newbern, you're right. It just has that powerful, almost calming, yet powerful effect when you hear him talk. He is the Justice League with that voice.
Yeah. Now, what are your thoughts? Because currently, in the current adaptations of the Justice League and Superman, Superman is being voiced by Jerry O'Connell.
Yeah. So in doing a little bit of research for this, because I do a little bit of homework prior to hopping on here, I saw that. I didn't know that until tonight, and I'm not terribly happy about it. I knew I didn't like the new voice. I couldn't put my finger on who it was. And now that I know that, I'm even less happy, to be honest with you.
Well, I have nothing against Jerry O'Connell. I was a big Sliders fan.
Okay.
And, I have a fondness for Joe's Apartment. But, and you want to talk about you don't like it. Anything, and again, no offense to this actor, any voice of Superman is better than Adam Baldwin did in Superman Doomsday. That is the one flaw.
I thought maybe we'd not just talk about that.
That is the one flaw that I will give these DC animated movies is, and again, I like Adam Baldwin. I'm a huge Firefly fan, speaking of Alan Tudyk. And another guy we'll talk about later, Nathan Fillion.
Oh.
You know what? Wait.
Nate.
Gina Torres is also done DC animated. There's a lot of DC animated people in Firefly.
Firefly, just bringing the heat with the voice acting.
But Adam Baldwin could not be the voice of Superman. He never needs to be the voice of Superman ever again.
So you're talking about big no-nos. Let's rewind real quick. I'm going to say Ben McKenzie in Batman Year One was terrible. It almost made the movie unwatchable for me, having to listen to him voice Batman in Batman Year One, the animated movie. It was just bad.
What about, was it Jeremy Sisto? I think it was New Frontier.
Yeah, didn't
I
like
wasn't
it.
A huge fan of that one.
Didn't like it.
Yeah, I can't talk though about Superman without just giving the nod to the OG himself, Bud Collyer, who was the original voice of Superman back in the radio show in the 40s, the Fleischer cartoons. He's the one that gave that, this looks like a job for Superman.
That was spot on. That was really good. Like I have little chills right now going on. Good job.
It's iconic. You got to give that nod to Bud Collyer being the original voice of Superman. I had to throw that out there.
You just transported me back to my childhood in the 1940s, gathered around the radio. Thank you for that.
Not a problem. Let's move on to another character, and let me see who first comes to your mind.
Okay.
Who's the voice of the Flash?
Laramy. Let me see. You're pretty knowledgeable on all things superhero. So how about Rosenbaum? Like
Definitely Rosenbaum.
I like him as the Flash, even though the irony of him being the Flash and also being who, Laramy?
Lex Luthor.
There we go.
At the same time, he was playing those characters at the same time.
I wonder how many people actually know that though. You might be dropping some new knowledge on some people right now.
I don't know about that. I mean, you and I did talk about it in the Comfort and Joy episode.
I hope you all listened.
So Michael Rosenbaum, definitely the voice of the Flash. Although he was Wally West, he wasn't Barry Allen.
It's true still, but...
Do you have a voice you associate with Barry Allen's version of the Flash?
I honestly don't, because I associate Rosenbaum so closely with being the Flash, even though he's Wally West.
Yeah, I agree. Let me throw out two Barry Allen versions to you that came to mind when I was planning for this episode. So you've got the most recent one, which is Christopher Gorham.
Right.
He's the one that's been playing him in the more recent movies.
Okay.
But he wasn't the first one to come to my mind. The first one that came to my mind only did it once, and that was Neil Patrick Harris for New Frontier.
Laramy, I'd forgotten about that, to be honest with you.
So then that means he wasn't that memorable.
Yeah, that means it wasn't that memorable. As much as I love Neil Patrick Harris, and I do enjoy NPH, because it's Rosenbaum is the same thing with Newbern, the longevity of it, just the consistency of hearing that actor voice that character.
Yeah, I can't argue that. Okay. Rosenbaum is the Flash, period. Now let's move on to another one. You're talking about Wally West versus Barry Allen. What about Green Lantern? Hal Jordan, John Stewart.
See, I'm a Phil Lamar, John Stewart guy.
Oh, there's no question.
Through and through.
There's no question. I can't even think.
I can't tell you.
I honestly couldn't. I racked my brain, and without doing a Google search, I can't name anyone else who has voiced John Stewart.
If you had a gun to my head, I wouldn't be able to tell you.
Now, Hal Jordan, on the other hand, I could name a few.
Right. Ryan Reynolds, when he was CGI'd into the movie completely.
No.
Okay. Sorry. No, not that one. My bad.
Although, again, right off the bat, it's Nathan Fillion. Nathan Fillion's voice immediately is Hal Jordan, Green Lantern.
Yep.
He's done it for several of the animated movies. Although, if you haven't been able to tell you, I'm a huge fan of the New Frontier movie.
Mm-hmm.
In that, Hal Jordan is voiced by David Boreanaz of Angel from Buffy the Vampire Slayer fame.
That's new knowledge for me. I did not know that.
Yeah, and
that's a good voice acting job. Yeah.
Yeah, because again, same with Neil Patrick Harris in the same movie, because that movie really centered around the Flash and Green Lantern, Hal Jordan and Barry Allen. And so the voices of David Boreanaz and Neil Patrick Harris, to me, that worked. It really worked.
They do. And again, in that vacuum of a movie, they do a good job of playing off each other.
Oh, speaking of, we talked about how there's no other voice than Phil Lamar for John Stewart. there is no other voice of John Jones, Martian Manhunter, other than Carl Lumbly.
Yeah, preach.
That's period.
Yeah,
Done.
Done. I don't even want to talk about anybody else.
Yeah, even though he's not the voice of Jean in New Frontier that I just talked about how much I love, I didn't like that voice. Carl Lumbly. Carl Lumbly is Martian Manhunter. Done.
It's majestic to hear that voice.
It's great. I mean, it's almost as if it's almost like the voice of Dennis Haysbert, who, everybody just, that voice, Allstate. Okay. So here's the thing. People may notice we're not talking about a lot of female characters. And that's primarily because, unfortunately, the female characters haven't been in enough to really develop the key voice. The closest we've gotten is, of course, Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
Can you immediately think of someone who is the voice of Wonder Woman?
I cannot.
Currently, it's Rosario Dawson.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
First time hearing of this.
Yeah, currently it's Rosario Dawson. She's been the voice of Wonder Woman in all of the recent movies.
Okay.
If you go back to Justice League, it was a voice actor by the name of Susan Eisenberg. Wonder Woman's one that when I think of Wonder Woman, I'm thinking of the live action. I'm thinking of Linda Carter. I'm thinking of Gal Gadot.
Yeah.
I'm not hearing an animated voice.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say Rosario Dawson is not doing an awesome job. Not to say Susan Eisenberg didn't do an awesome job. Kerry Russell for that one Wonder Woman animated movie. When she got her own solo movie. It was the voice of Kerry Russell, Felicity. Yep. For New Frontier, going back to one of my favorites, it was Xena, warrior princess herself, Lucy Lawless, was the voice of Wonder Woman. But it didn't resonate enough.
Yeah, it doesn't stick with you. And again, that probably is due to the fact of not enough PR being done for those animated films, maybe, or maybe just not enough of them are getting done. For whatever reason, DC does ride the Superman and for the most part Batman coattails, so to speak, and pushes out those DC animated films centered around those characters. I think you and I would agree. You'd like to see more stories told centered around these other characters, especially some of these female characters that aren't getting their due. I
mean, Hawkgirl from Justice League, I can tell you that she was voiced by Maria Canales Barrera, how you pronounce her name.
Good job.
I can tell you that's who it was. For those of you not familiar with the actress, she was the mom on Wizards of Waverly Place. Mm-hmm. But that's really it. And there's not enough Hawkgirl out there for me to go, oh, I want Maria Canales Barrera's voice. Mm-hmm. Because I haven't heard anybody else attempt to do the character. Yeah,
you would like a little variance, some choice, some option before making a final stamp on this is the person I identify as this character. And there just hadn't been enough of that to be able to do that with hardly any of the DC female characters.
Yeah, and as great as there are female voice actors out there, we mentioned Tara Strong earlier, there's Gray Griffiths. I mean, there's some great female voice characters out there, actors out there who have performed great in everything that they do. We just really need to see more of these female characters in DC animated stuff so that we can have that Kevin Conroy for a female character, so that we can have that George Newbern for a female character, so we can have that Phil Lamar, that Carl Lumbly. We need that female voice.
I couldn't agree more with you, and I'm hoping, and I don't know how long it'll go, that maybe Kaylee Cuoco as Harley Quinn, and I think Lake Bell, who voices Poison Ivy in the Harley Quinn TV series, like that they get more and more recognition. I'd love to see Lake Bell selfishly have a Poison Ivy series, but that's a whole other conversation. But hopefully that continues, that trend. DC sees the popularity of those characters and continues to push them.
All right, well, there you have it. There is something for you to consider. Thank you very much, Blake. Please leave us a positive review on Apple Podcast. Like, subscribe, and follow us on your favorite podcast platform. Hey, even follow us on social media. We are at Moving Panels on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and even TikTok. And if you have any thoughts you'd like to share directly or want to suggest a topic for the show, you can email us at movingpanels@gmail.com. So thank you again, Blake, for joining me, and I look forward to another great conversation down the road.
Take care, guys.
All right, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.